Hello.
Hello. How? Thank you so much, Hesu. Thank you for being here, Tim, and coming all the way to Korea. I feel much more comfortable on the stage with you on my side, and I also feel comfortable with you being all here. So maybe should we start by doing a little presence check with everybody?
Let's do that presence check, Olafur. Hello. Yeah. Comfortable. That's a good word, isn't it? Comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Inspiring also.
It's a feeling that I get when I walk around Olafur's work, actually, is the feeling of being both inspired and somehow soothed at the same time. It's a very nice combination. It's such a great honor to have been invited here, and I'm so grateful to you for having me. And thank you for listening to us talk. And I hope we can... what do I hope we can do?
I was just thinking about it. The success of this, I think, depends on our, shared situation here. I'm trying to touch the floor with my feet. You are clearly halfway.
Yeah, I'm halfway there. Yeah. One of my feet is touching the air.
I sometimes work in a very intuitive way. And then you can sense that intuition or this not yet verbalized idea shaping itself.
Yeah, I do, for my job, philosophy. But it would be a very bad thing, I think, if I was to explain Olafur's work in a certain way. Not that I don't want to use words to describe it, but it's more like Olafur's work helps me to explain my thoughts to myself. It's that way round.
And then I sometimes welcome this intuitive state of an idea. Maybe I could also call it a gut feeling, which is a great word, right?
Yeah, it's a physical sensation, actually, and I think philosophy also is a physical act. It's quite similar to geometry in a way. Plato, in his academy, over the door of the academy was written something like, "Don't even think about coming in here unless you are." And then there's a Greek word, geometrikos, which means sort of geometried up, or something like that. And what does that mean? Does it mean knowing something? Does it mean having a concept of something? No, not exactly. Because in those days, geometry was nothing to do with numbers at all. It was to do with literally simply using two instruments to do calculations, a straight edge and a compass. And so it was very physical, actually. And the whole idea was to somehow be close to Earth. The word geo is Earth, and metry is, funnily enough, it comes from the word like pacing or walking. So when I hear this word geometry, before it turns into a word for measuring things, it's really more like walking meditation.
So that's the feeling I was talking about. Because I'm not looking at an idea as something which is standing or stopped or sitting. It's actually something which is in the process of becoming. And I like thinking of Tim sometimes when trying to apply a skin to the idea. The skin could be a language skin. So suddenly I can say, I think this idea could be said like using 3 words. Maybe one word can be open.
Open. Yeah. Don't you find like Olafur's work is so inviting? You feel like you're being invited in somehow. And when you're invited in somewhere, there's a feeling of being aware of the future in some very tangible way. And I truly think, and I hope this doesn't sound too crazy, that art actually comes from the future. And in a way, it is the future, right? And it's sort of opening up a possibility for some kind of future-ness before any kind of predictable future, right? There's this kind of open feeling. Open is a great word because it doesn't mean that things don't exist. It means that they exist, but in a very sort of, they don't have a copyright stamp on them. Like there isn't a little Intel Inside thing in every little cell of my body, you know, saying, this is a Tim Morton leg, this is a Tim Morton foot, this is a Tim Morton nose, you know, it's not like that. Nevertheless, this is Tim, right? But Tim is open. Like that less ego wall, Olafur, I was thinking another reason why that's such a great piece is that the wall itself has less ego, in a way, because it's open, literally. It's perforated, you know? And I think this perforation quality is really wonderful. Like, I feel like things are perforated and worlds are perforated, and because worlds are perforated, we can have some feeling of community and solidarity with one another, not just human beings, but also between human beings and non-human beings.
Let's hold on to the future just for one more moment. Because I think it is worth shaping a little bit as an idea, or quite literally. First of all, I wanted to say that when I talked about this space just before we have a language for an idea, I wanted to address open space, which I think we all have. So I think it is important also to include our collective focus on that particular moment or that particular passing where we have a feeling, we are almost conscious about it. We have not yet given it structure, such as language. And there is a, how should I say, a processing or a playing. And this space is interesting because I think a lot of the things that I work on exist in this space, because I could propose somebody to come, and I'm not sure this works, but I'm very interested in the idea of the future. Somebody come and they say, oh, I have that feeling too. And I was almost giving my feeling a structure, a language. And now, when looking at a work of art or listening to Tim, my feeling was given structure, or my feeling was reflected. And I say, oh, I was seen. My idea, my feeling, my gut feeling has been seen by the, well, now it comes by the future. You know, I walked into the future and I was welcomed.
That's beautiful.
And I was not ignored. I was not marginalized. I felt, oh, I'm good enough. I was emotionally welcomed to the exhibition.
Being seen is maybe one of the nicest feelings in the whole world, you know, when you suffer from some kind of trauma. And I think we all do in some way have some kind of wound or trauma inside us. And even maybe things also have this trauma, because everything has some kind of form or structure. And you could think about the structure itself as a kind of wound or trauma. So Olafur and his use of the mirror and the play of the mirror, and the way in which, in fact, the piece actually sees you. You feel seen literally by the artwork, and being seen by the future, that's beautiful.
Well, I sometimes think that I'm alone But then when you are seen, you realize, well, you are not as alone as you thought, at least. But you said something, Tim, last time we spoke, a work, maybe we can repeat that. A work of art has been sent from the future. How was that?
Yeah.
What was that?
Well, it goes back to this not yet feeling that you're talking about, Olafur. I think it's such a perfect, beautiful, fragile feeling, and it needs to be preserved in our world. We are very, very hasty to kind of delete that feeling so that we can get on with whatever we think our practical project is. But right now, we're entering an age of ecological awareness where human beings have to include so many more non-human beings in their calculations and policies and ethics and philosophy and art and everything. And so we don't know exactly where we are anymore, and I feel like this is a very important feeling, actually, not knowing exactly where you are. Because in a strange way, that's exactly what being in a place really is. It really isn't this kind of hard, solid, rigidly bounded thing. It's this kind of hesitant, not yet quality, a little bit like what happens with very, very tiny things, you know, with quantum physics. Very, very tiny things seem to be shimmering or vibrating, right? And then this kind of shimmering, vibrating quality, it's so easy to destroy, you know? So I feel like this not yet quality is the future, actually, and that aspect of art isn't just like from the future, it actually is the future, and there are different kinds of future, right? There are different kinds of future that different kinds of things open up and allow, and Olafur's work, I feel, allows a very, very open, very generous future, and that's so important right now. Many philosophers like me try to talk in a very negative way about the present moment, but I don't think this is helpful at all. And we need to find a way to imagine, or even just dream, or even just fantasize, or even just allow ourselves the possibility of doing that, something a little bit different from what we have now. And I think that Olafur's work is like a very, very helpful, like device, almost medicine, to help you to do that. It's not just representing something, it's actually encouraging that.
I think that being in a country with a very strong contemplative history, I think there is some kind of tradition to also appreciate the, should I say, the acknowledgement of the sense of presence, but not as a static or solidified, but rather as you spoke about, did you say vibrating, vibrating space. And I think one of the reasons why I have been drawn to Tim's writing is in fact because of his addressing the need for ecological coexistence. I mean, how to, for instance, address the climate questions, and what are in fact the motive and the motivation. Because we know the motive, we want to have a solution. That is the motive. But the motivation, it's much harder. And when looking for that particular, feeling, we can also sometimes find motivation when I said, "Oh, I'm not alone." That can be very motivating.
It comes from this feeling of smile a little bit. There's a smile quality to Olafur's work, and I feel like since we're in this age of like mass extinction, right? And since we're in this time where every time you open up the newspaper, there's some new horrible statistic about something, and these statistics always change every day, and so you're like constantly being almost like hammered by these statistics, 5, 24, 100,000, 60%, and it's even confusing to keep up with it, and it's sort of like being slapped about, We need some kind of non-violent quality, right? I think that when you can smile for real, then you can cry, don't you think? When you can smile or laugh, then the emotion can come, and you can start to cry. And I think that's very, very important right now. Learning how to have this kind of genuine heart of sadness, which is not necessarily a feeling of depression, which I know very well, but it has a kind of light, tender quality, and it's sad only because you can't hold on to it. It's more like a liquid. Olafur was talking about how objects aren't solid necessarily, and my idea is that maybe they're more like liquids. You can't really hold on to them.
I also want to include the people translating this. I greet you. I like this idea of letting go. We yesterday, and also heard about, do we feel comfortable with letting go? Or is that considered not so successful? And we have children, some of us, and we know very well that in the museum, parents, they come and they welcome the opportunity to be very discipline-oriented, even though this is not really nurturing the explorative child that you wish to bring up. So we ask the child, don't let go. Even though when you see the ventilator, children start to run. And then parents get nervous. Not just because the children is running, but because the other parents whose children are not running look at me and they say, I'm not a good parent. And we live in a culture where letting go is considered failure. So let's together decide that the children that we have are good enough. And they should feel appreciated when exploring. I see a ventilator. So I have my frontal, what are they called? The two frontal things in the brain?
Lobes.
Lobes. The frontal lobes are my, impulsive reaction, right? And it's directly linked to my physical activity. And I immediately start to do like this because I am physically interpreting my stimuli. I am letting go. I start to laugh, I get loud, I cannot control myself. Who can address ecological questions in the future? The highly disciplined children? I don't know. Or the more explorative?
Wow, that's so deep. Oh my God! Do you want to write my books for me? Because that's like, wow. Because I keep talking about this now. The way we think about the ecological future is always now about efficiency and sustainability, and I feel like these words are words that are all to do with the kind of oil culture that we live in. Oil is a precious, toxic commodity, and we have to be very careful how we use it in all kinds of ways. But in an ecological future where there's no oil, in a way, this happened to me. I got wind power for my whole house a few months ago, and for a couple of days I felt so holy and pure and disciplined and perfect, like, oh, I'm being such a good boy, And then 2 days later, I realized actually what this means is I can have a disco in every room of my house with like decks and strobes and people dancing, and far, far less life forms would suffer if I did this. Well, of course, maybe the neighbors might have a bit of a problem, but I feel like actual genuine ecological future has to do with multiplying pleasure rather than restricting or restraining somehow. And it's maybe the problem is that it's actually too easy to let go. You know, I think about this sometimes. Maybe the problem is like, we actually use things like Facebook, I feel, unfortunately, to inhibit our natural capacity to let go. And I feel like maybe Facebook or other forms of social media is like 52% super tight, judgmental, and maybe 48%, cats taking a ride on a scooter, right? And I think the cats taking a ride on a scooter is much more philosophically deep than this kind of guilt tweaking that can happen on social media.
So I'm very interested in how we see each other, and also to what extent are we aware? Do I look at my world on the expense of the values that I talk about? Or do the looking actually act on behalf of the world I trust? It's very interesting because I sometimes think we say and we know so much. We know it all. Maybe we have not verbalized it, but emotionally we know enough. But how to act accordingly, how to translate our knowledge into action is so difficult. I also ask my children not to run. I make mistakes. I get really annoyed. Stop running, I said. I don't think she's here.
She ran somewhere. We make this very strong distinction between playing and acting, doing. And I think maybe playing and doing are part of the same thing. And I think as part of this, we also make this distinction in our political world between being very serious politics, and unserious stuff. But wouldn't it be great if sometimes politicians could be playful somehow? Wouldn't it be great if they could be, this is the English word, silly. Why is silliness not a political acceptable emotion? There's a very wonderful ex-mayor of Reykjavik, my friend Jon Gunnar, and he is a stand-up comedian, and he used silliness to do the most wonderful things after the big financial crash of 2008, and really helped Reykjavik, actually, and helped everybody. So I feel like maybe this category of play, it's a fragile thing. It's easy to kind of destroy it and turn your life into something that has to do with knowing exactly where you're going and sort of going there in a straight line. Unlike the fan, the fan is playing, right? It's just playing all by itself. It's having a good time whether you jump up to it or not, somehow. The mirror globe keeps on reflecting the other mirror globes, whether or not you're playing with it. Somehow these things are inviting you in. When I go up the escalator into the rainbow room there, the escalator's going a little bit fast. I like this feeling. I feel like I'm being sucked into something, and I'm like, oh, what's going to happen next? You go into this void, and there's this scintillating, delicate liquid. It's the original work was called beauty, and that is beauty. That's this very evanescent, evaporating quality that's very hard to hold on to, but it's completely real. And it's how you know, actually, that there are other things in this world other than just your ego, really, And so I very much want to kind of go through that misty curtain of water up there, I somehow I wish we could be in it right now, having this conversation. It would be really awesome. I might even want to be under it, with the mist coming on me. I need a shower.
So, as you can tell, also from the way I enjoy talking about my work, I very much enjoy the risk of being honest.
Mm.
The Icelandic politician / comedian, his first promise was, "I will never lie."
Mm.
And everybody in Iceland said, "Amazing."
Mm.
The first promise was one he could not keep. But actually, he tried very hard to always be honest. So very often he said, "Oh, I actually don't know." Or he very honest said, "I'm not sure." So for a politician, he became quite unique because he always said, "Oh, I have to look into that. I have no idea." And in a way, people started trusting him for being insecure. And people said,
Wow.
or he said, "I actually have to find out. It will take some time." And he expressed his gut feeling, and people say, "Oh, I know you are like me." So normally politicians, we find it difficult to identify because they don't seem to be like me. They always have an answer. And I start to doubt, did I really elect that person? And suddenly I don't identify. I think politics, my God. Populism, nationalism, arrogance, macho chauvinism, all kinds of challenges in the world as such. See now, Tim, let me just go back to something which I thought was interesting. Or maybe we'll get to it, but I would like to propose that calling an exhibition a parliament is also a good word. Yesterday somebody said to me, "But isn't a parliament something, why would you call an exhibition a parliament? Isn't a parliament something boring or negative?" And it's so interesting that you would think, or people today, and all of us, we say, "Oh, parliaments, my God, horrible. I don't identify." And still, of course, the truth is that the parliaments are the places which are to represent our feelings and take our ideas and turn them into action. We call it democracy. And when you don't have a parliament, you have a dictator, like very close by. So I think that this house and cultural institutions like this are the parliaments of the future. I think that we should ask the politicians to come and collaborate.
Oh, yeah.
And I promise you, the artists can learn from going to the parliaments too. I'm not saying the artists are any better. Certainly I am not. But so, do you see what a successful opportunity if we take all the museums into the parliaments and all the politicians into the museums?
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe also having baths or saunas in these places. I sometimes wonder whether the UN would be better if everybody was in a bath. I'm English, right? So, we have to have baths all the time. The idea that everybody would have their own bath, right? The Germany bath, Switzerland bath, Russia bath. Everyone's in the bath. Best kind of bubble bath, hot water. This might be a good idea, yeah? I think Olafur's work is profoundly political, but it's not that kind of political stuff that tries to sort of push you. It's more like it's sort of pulling you. I'm a meditator, and I love meditating in groups. And the reason why I love it is because everyone can feel insecure. I really liked it when you said that word. Everyone is able to feel insecure together without sort of stepping on anyone else. Like the guy next to you might be, having some plan to take over the universe, right? But there's nothing that he can do about it right now because he's meditating, right? So it's really cool that way. It's a way to kind of coexist in a non-violent, introverted way in public, and I think that's one big reason why this kind of space, the art gallery space, could in fact indeed genuinely be a fantastic public forum because it's a place where we allow ourselves to go inside ourselves a little bit, you know, and not necessarily to find something, but just literally just to turn the attention to the inside. Isn't that interesting that a work of art could do that? You know, it's over there somehow, but it's kind of enticing you to go here, yeah.
Which is different than a shopping mall, where you are being, or we are being told how, what, and why to take in. Do you see? So here, I think the idea is to encourage, how should I say it? Encourage you not consuming, but you are in fact, if not producing, you are co-producing. Now I think it's good to hold on to this idea of a parliament and the fact that the room is in fact a force. We know now about crowdfunding. You should not underestimate the power of the crowd. It's interesting. It's very disruptive for hierarchical systems. We just sometimes forget. We give, if everybody gives, you know, £1. No, he's saying for the, and you know, £1. We can call it the power of the £1, as I heard in a lecture recently. But so I'm just very interested in: do we feel powerful or not? If we are consuming, we are less likely to feel empowered. But if we are producing, we are more likely to feel empowered. And if we are producing together, and so on and so forth. Can I make a small, maybe even a quantum leap?
Sure.
I actually thought of bringing something up. Have you noticed there are such amazing objects in the rest of the museum? My show is okay, but the really fantastic things are, of course, the pottery, the vases, the porcelain, and so on. I just thought we should include them as well.
Yeah.
Especially in that vibrating, because we maybe we make the mistake to think that this piece of porcelain, which is, so now it's interesting, is it old or is it nowness?
Oh, there you go. Yeah. You know, that's a funny thing about our world, is that we have these ideas about time that don't make any sense at all. But it's because we've become so addicted to the measuring devices with which we measure time, and then we assume that the measuring device is the time, right? So because your measuring device goes 1, 2, 3, according to some very accurate atomic clock at this point, we think that's what time is, actually. But, you know, when you analyze it, time is more like a sort of liquid that kind of sprays out of things, like that reverse waterfall, in a way. And time is not to do with little dots of presence. It's not the case that, and I think you know this if you meditate, it's not the case that you go from one moment to the next moment to the next moment. It's more like there's a sort of feeling, and this feeling is something that I like to call nowness, to make it a little bit different from present. And I'm glad you brought this up, actually, because in a way, this affects and changes and alters our sense of what the word produce could mean, and also what the word consume could mean, because we've inherited this idea of active versus passive that's really a big problem somehow. We think active is super, super different from passive, and we think passive is maybe a little bit evil. Like a lot of Western philosophers are very scared of art, right? And it's because it makes them feel passive, right? It makes them feel like they got moved, talking of movement, by something that they didn't intend to happen to them, right? And so that must be evil, right? They had some kind of force was operating on them that was like not in their control, yeah? But this feeling of nowness is very much a slippery liquid feeling that you can't really control, and it could be any kind of size. Think about the fact that we're all breathing oxygen right now. About 3 billion years ago, there was a huge ecological catastrophe for the bacteria, and the catastrophe was called oxygen. That was a big problem for these anaerobic bacteria that didn't breathe oxygen. They excreted all this oxygen into their environment, and they poisoned their world, so they had to go and hide, and they went and hid in single-celled organisms, which is why flowers and plants are green, because they contain little chloroplasts, which are the bacteria. And it's why I can move my lips to speak, because I have this energy coming from the mitochondria, which are these bacteria living inside my cells in a symbiotic way, right? Now that means, and we're breathing oxygen right now, so this oxygen catastrophe, this event, is happening now. It's happening right now, right? Like the Big Bang. You know, when you turn on an old TV and you see the TV snow, right, and the snow on the TV is actually the cosmic microwave background radiation, yeah? And they say it's left over from the Big Bang, but it's better to say it's that part of the Big Bang that's happening right now. And in a way, you know, me and this sentence and this microphone are just the current state of the Big Bang, yeah? So it's not like things in the past are over there in the past. They're still happening in some way, just like that beautiful Celadon vase is still happening. It's now.
That's the vase, you could say, is vibrating or resonating. And one could also say it has been on a journey. It is a new vase because it only just arrived to greet you and say, oh, hello. Just like you arrived to the museum. I think this is quite important. We tend to think of looking at a vase that was made a long time ago as traveling back in time. Oh, so that's how it was when they did the vase. But the truth is, we are here in nowness, or hosted, or held by nowness. And the vase is experiencing us, and we, the vase, here and now. And I think the reason why this is interesting is because there is a, how should I say, there is a lot of, you know, what do you call nihilistic leaning back in the past. Oh, it was much nicer before.
Yeah.
And I guess my point is, if we would think of the vase in this moment, we would also allow the vase more relevance today.
Oh, it's beautiful.
We could say that the vase is in fact, what you say, vase, the vase.
Yeah, I'm American now, so I have to say vase.
Vase, okay, so the vase is vasing. And maybe the one I saw was green, or greenish. Maybe I can say the vase is vasing greenishly. Do you see? So I'm activating. I'm asking, the vase is telling me that it is on the move. It does not move very fast, but I just think as an idea of how our thinking is also very much a construct. It's a liberating idea that you say, oh, hi vase, where did you come from and where are you going?
You might even say, just carrying that thought on, you might even say that green is happening in the key of vase. You know, like Bach's sonata in the key of G. So green in the key of vase. That's interesting to think about it that way.
And should we have a relationship with this journey? We could also say, this table used to be a tree. For the time being, it is a table. But the table is on the move to become something else. Maybe even again a tree. We don't know.
It's open. I love the vases of Cézanne. I love the paintings of Cézanne where he has a vase on a table, because the way he paints is almost to allow you to feel like the opening of that vase is kind of inviting you in. Somehow your eye wants to kind of jump into that hole, yeah? And vase is a very inviting object, right? It's inviting you to put flowers or water, yeah? And somehow it comes back to this idea of invitation that we were talking about at first, right?
Yeah, and it has to do with also, is a museum hosting the past, or is it in fact a spaceship from the future?
Oh,
from which has a lot of active contemporary things. So I think that the reason why we put a vase in the museum in the first place is because it has relevance.
Wow.
It is relevating. No, I will stop that. But you see, the point is, is the museum something we go into to go into the past, or do we go to the museum to go to the future?
Hosting the future. Now that is a title for something, isn't it? Hosting the future. Hello. It's so nice to be here, really. The only reason why I'm having like the ability to say somewhat intelligent things is because you're all so present right now. It's beautiful.
We came up with a few words: open,
yeah,
parliament, nowness,
movement.
Movement, yes. And I think breathing should be brought in. I like that bacterial story, Tim.
Right.
Yeah, not bad.
Cheers.
No, it's good, yeah.
Right, it's happening now, Yeah, things are breathing. You can put that on my gravestone. If I die in the next 5 minutes, you can, which I have no intention of doing, you can put on my gravestone, objects are breathing. You can do that.
I don't mean to step back and justify or explain anything, but when I was a younger student, I was quite inspired in the dematerialization of the object. And to work with that, I focused a lot on experiential situations. And one particular philosophical school, which I think you call continental philosophy, such as phenomenology, they were kind of mapping this, how we as a subject produce the object. But still, the predominant idea was that the subject was active and the object, the vase, was passive. So for 10 years, I enjoyed this modality, constituting that the people in the room are the one who makes sense of what Tim is saying. But the truth is, later in my life, I felt that there are more to objects than just being passively waiting for you to engage in them. Why not propose that also the object has, we could call it, what does you call it? It has.
You could call it maybe all kinds of words. Sometimes people say agency. Maybe it's a little bit of a puzzle word to use, but maybe some kind of liveliness or vibrancy or some kind of quality of its own. It's a dance, right? And I think maybe philosophy for the last 200 years, in Europe and America at least, has always been about one side of the dance, which is the so-called subject, right? And the one that is accessing the thing. And just recently people have become interested in the accessee. We've been emphasizing the accessor, but what about the accessee? Because really it's a dance, And for some reason I'm somehow thinking of the woman who was the governor of Texas before George Bush took over, and she said something very funny, which maybe we could bring into the room right now. She said, Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, right? These two great dancers. One was a man, one was a woman, and Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, only backwards in high heels. And somehow maybe that's what these so-called objects are doing for us. They're like dancing with us, only backwards in high heels. And maybe it might be a good idea right now, given that we've been very efficiently destroying quite a lot of them, such as, polar bears and coral, to allow them to lead a little bit this dance.
That's exactly what I was aiming at, because once adapting this idea, it's this reality, I should say, which it happens to also have a very funny name called Triple O, because I'm Olafur, I in my study call it the quadruple O. It's called object-oriented ontology, just should you wish to look it up, because there is a group of quite lovely thinkers and doers in this group. So the argument, and of course it is more complex, but I take it the easy way. The argument is that also the polar bear is on a mission, right? So how are we to see it as an object which just dies because we happen to live the way we do? So the idea of reversing or to skipping the object and the subject and to say subject, or object, or just say it doesn't matter. I think that's a very healthy perspective when talking about ecology and the climate. So as a model for constituting reality, I find it quite liberating.
The floor, the beautiful floor, with the incredible geometrical pattern. In a way, the floor is kind of inviting you, it's sort of showing you how to move, right? Like when you drive, it's much safer to allow the other cars around you and the road to kind of suck you around in almost a hypnotic state. If you try to drive, you end up being dead very quickly. I think maybe free will is a little bit overrated. I think maybe even in neuroscience now they're saying when you intend to do something, you already did it, maybe about 1/10 of a second before you intended to do, right? That's scary for some people, but actually myself, I find this extremely comforting because it means that we don't have to scratch our heads so hard to come up with a solution to the problems as if we were spinning around in some kind of void and we were trying to imitate Jehovah or something like that, trying to make the world out of nothing, going back to this subject of nihilism. We already have all kinds of things to work with. I think artists already know that, right? They have paint, they have mirrors, they have all kinds of things that they're fascinated by, and they allow themselves to be fascinated by them. And that's why we can have this incredible, beautiful exhibition that Olafur's done, because he allows himself to be seduced and fall in love with things that aren't him. Yeah, that's pretty healthy.